1973 Williams Gulfstream. What we're looking at is the head unit, the back box. And this is a single player unit. We have our score reels. We have our match unit. We have our ball count unit. We have our replay unit. We've got our Jones plugs, and we got a bank of relays. I've taken the pleasure of fixing up and getting it to work appropriately the ball count unit. It's completely been stripped down, both sides. You have the bakelite side, which you can see all these contacts have been cleaned up. The leaf fingers have been removed. They've been cleaned up on the contacts as well. On our cog side, we've got our gear. We have our 2 coils. This is a dual stepper unit, both up and down, single increments. We have our springs. We have our cog spring. We have our end of stroke switch, and we have our main switch that will determine both increases and decreases in the ball count unit. So the way that this works is we have our coil right here, moves the cog unit, moves the spring. What that does is it changes the position of these fingers. When you get to the end, then for decreasing, it will be this coil on top. So with the levers and the springs and the cog unit, you have this. One step down at a time, nice and smooth. It is not restricted. There is very little resistance, and you have a smooth unit. It's clean, it's working. It's gonna make your game function the way that it's supposed to. Then you have units like this. So again, this is the match unit. You have a coil here. There is a lot of resistance. I mean, I'm having to push this up 10 times harder than on the ball count unit that I've cleaned. One of the main reasons is these have steel sleeves still left in them. So we remove the steel sleeves, put in nylon sleeves. Very first thing that we do. Then we remove the cog itself. Let me adjust this light real quick. We remove the spring itself, and we remove the individual springs for the increase and decrease. You can see that this has almost no give here. It's not tension at all. We're gonna have to adjust that. Should have a little tension on it. Any of the pivot points in the arms and the lever arms, those are all going to be removed and cleaned. Where the arms actually rest, those are going to be removed and cleaned. On the bakelite side, you have your contact rivet points right here. These are your contacts. These have their pressure from a spring. These get super gummed up. We're going to remove this bakelite board. We're going to use alcohol, and we're going to clean all of these contacts. And we're going to take 400 or 500 grit sandpaper or Scotch-Brite pad, whatever you have handy, and we are going to clean all of our rivets. And that's going to allow us to have the least amount of resistance and the greatest amount of conductivity between these 2 points, which again, this is our match unit, and what you see on this side is a random set of contacts being touched, making the match. So that's the match unit. And definitely not functioning as smooth as you want. Score reels. Again, super easy. This is 1 coil, and you can see the coil banks down here. The coil Right now they're set on the 0 point. Let me try to get my finger in here to ignition. You can see the switch stack. You got your switch stacks there. Now watch as you see that drop down? Now for the next one, it stays in position. It stays in position because it's past its home position. Now watch what happens right then and there. We have gone back to its home position, and we are continuing to transition the wheel. And you can see that working with the lever. You got your bakelite board right there. These whole wheels pop right out. So again, like the other unit, you have your coil, you have your switch stack, you have your wheel, and you have your bakelite board, your contacts. Okay? All the contacts being made through the transition of the wheel when it's firing the coil. Trying to get you so you can see this. And if you look right in there, oops, it's hard to see, but you can see see the switches there? And your switches are rotating with the wheel. That's making your connection to move the wheel and your points and register it appropriately. So we'll put that back. Then we have right down here, we have our replay unit. Sorry. Replay unit, again, same idea as your score reel. Single coil, switch stack. Actually, I take that back. This is a dual coil, so this steps up and down. Cog spring, so it's the same as the ball count unit that we showed you. And this one right here, you can see if we plunge it in. Right now, I've plunged in, it hasn't moved at all. It's completely stuck. I have to pull the plunger out to get it to move. Same thing, over and over. So I'm manually advancing this. It's not going through its function. If you look, steel coil sleeve, the wheel's going to be gummed up, the spring is gummed up, all of your joints for your levers, your pivot points, those are all going to be nasty. We'll remove that wheel. We'll do the same thing we did on the ball count unit. For your relay bank, we're basically looking at a set of relays and a coordinating switches for each relay. So right here, this relay, when it is engaged, it engages these switches. You can see that there's 4 of them and they're normally open. When it engages, they become closed, and what you're looking for is about a 1/16 of an inch for a gap, and you want it to start initiating contact about halfway through its stroke. You will see switches that have a normally closed on their stack, so you'd see basically it would be closed, and then when the coil was engaged, all of a sudden they would open. Okay? Every once in a while you will see a set of switches, and I don't see any here, that are make or break. And your make or break switches, it will open up a contact on one side while it closes a contact on the other. And you will see those in different relay banks. All of these contacts for each one of these leaf switches will be cleaned with like 400 grit sandpaper or flex stone. The switch stack will be tightened up, and the coil springs will make sure that we're getting our full throw, our full motion, because there's not a lot of room for error, and you want to get that full motion back and forth. You want to get that snappiness. And then you got your Jones plugs here. These are the female side. These are where you're going to get your connections and communication between the lower cabinet, the playfield, and the back box. So you take your male pins, you clean them up with Scotch-Brite or wire brush, and you plug them in. They would allow it for good communication and good connection on the female side as well. Alright, so I was able to clean up the replay unit tonight, and like I said in the last video, disassembled the whole thing right down to the base plate. So we had the 2 coil sleeves that were steel originally, we replaced with nylon. We removed the switch stack, the cog spring, the gear, all the arms, all the springs, the wheel on the back side, and it is running super smooth right now. So I'm just going to demonstrate that for you here, if I can do it appropriately, smoothly, so you can see it. Now this is what was happening yesterday, where basically I would push in, and I'm going to have to hold this to demonstrate. So I would push in and it would get locked like that. So if I release it now, it moves freely. It's not restricted. It's moving 1 increment at a time. It is exactly how you want this thing to work. You can see on the top there, right here, we have our end of stroke switch that is being engaged and our switch stack. So again, nice and smooth. And on the opposite, we have the step down coil, which if I can show you here. And you can see that's just moving nice and smooth. You can see the wheel is moving smooth. Again, 1 increment at a time. There's no binding. Now we're to the end. I mean, it really cleaned up nicely. So again, switch stack. You can see it's at its 0 point right now, which means that there is no replays at all. You got your coil there with a new sleeve, all the armature, this whole unit here, this is all cleaned up. Any type of joint, which you see right here, this part right here, that pivot point was really gummed up, so that was completely removed. All the springs were cleaned, and you can see that gear and spring are very clean, no gunk. Backside was cleaned up too. I'll just demonstrate it from the front here so you can see. Still going to clean up the wheel itself, but you can see it's at its 0 point right now. One increment at a time. And then the step down. Another one done, guys. Next on our to-do list will be the match unit here. Alright, tonight we were working on the match unit and it came out great. So on the bakelite side, we had to remove this top board, and we soaked this whole board, which has all these snowshoe style pins. All of that was soaked in alcohol, so none of them are gummed up. I did not remove the pins. they seem like they had, they might be a pain in the ass to get back in. And none of them were seized to the point where I had to do much other than the soaking, so that was good. With this board off, we had the second bakelite board, which has your rivet contacts. All of those, you can see, were all scuffed up and cleaned with the Scotch-Brite. So this is now making good solid contact between these two contact points. So on the cog side, we stripped down the whole unit right down to the base plate, and we pulled the coil, cleaned that up, changed out the sleeve. All the levers got cleaned up, the pivot points where the E-clip is, your springs, and your cog. Now this is a single coil unit, so there is no cog spring. This is just a one direction rotation. There is no 0 point. It just continues to move in one direction. So again, strip that right down to the base plate. And if I can get this going properly, and you can see that just moves nice and smooth, one step at a time. So that works really, really nice. And what it correlates to is back to these contacts and how this was kind of gummed up before. And actually that coil, I remember showing how you had to push hard to get that coil to go in. That was really, really nasty. So this is the result of removing all the parts, cleaning them all up, and if you stop and you look, you can see that each one of these points is on a set of contacts. So that's our match unit. At some point I will be going over some of the solder joints, because a couple of these look like they were a little bit cold. So we'll probably clip it, reattach, and resolder. I'm going to do that with quite a bit of this machine. The back side of the board also has a bunch of solder contacts and jumpers, all stock. But one thing down, match unit's good, the ball count is good, the replay unit down there is good, and then hopefully tomorrow we'll get to these score reels. Alright, so tonight we are working on our score reels for the 1973 Williams Gulfstream. I figured I would just pull out a couple of these to show you what they look like when they have yet to be cleaned up. Okay, the reels themselves, they're going to be dirty, they're going to be stained. You might find some restrictive pivot points and such. Your plastics, those are super, super nasty. You can just see how dirty they are. Again, that's a pivot point. You know, that's a pivot point. That's a pivot point. All of that stuff being gummed up is not helping you. Your springs being gummed up, not helping you. Right here, that's a big area of restriction. Obviously that's both a pivot point and it's your sleeve going into the coil. So those would be replaced as far as the sleeve is concerned, and the plunger, if it was mushroomed or anything like that, that would also be replaced. Otherwise it would be cleaned up. So that's one of them. I also wanted to show you what one of them looks like with a bakelite board, because that's a good comparison. So we have our bakelite board. Excuse my fumbling. And again, your plastics on these are a little bit cleaner. Your coil is definitely not. And your board. So all of this, anywhere you see that spotting of rust, of green corrosion, all of that is it's going to become an intermittent connection at best. So these are really, really tarnished, and where you're going to have problems is the fact that this, if you look down here, you can see those two pins that are on leaf switches. Maybe you can get a better angle like this. So right in there, trying to get you a good view. Not really working out though. Let's see if I can't get it better on this side here. There you go. So those two leaf switches right there are at the bottom of the cog unit for the score reel. And they are making contact with these board traces. Okay, that's the signal being sent. So when you have gunk like that, you're going to have a lot of issues. Okay, let me show you, put this back for a second. And here's one that we've cleaned up. Okay, score reel. Nice and bright, no gunk, it's not tarnished. This one came out really, really nice. Then we've got our whole unit, and you can see it's cleaned up very, very well. You can see the bright, shiny traces of the board. You can see the pivot points of our armatures. All of that is very, very bright. The plastics have been cleaned up. The springs have been cleaned up. Where the wheel or the reel sits and where these armatures sit, these plastic armatures, all of that has been removed and cleaned thoroughly. And then we've got a new sleeve, and we've cleaned up our plunger. So if you look, again, there are our 2 points. Okay, that's a much better surface area to make contact with than what we were looking at previously. So that's what you want to look for with after cleaning a reel. Now to explain what it does and how it works, it's very, very simple. It might take a second for me to get a good position for you to be able to see it though. So basically you have a plunger, you have this end of stroke switch right here, and over here you have your other switch stack. Now right now you can see there's 3 contact switches, leaf switches on this stack. All of them are open. They're open because the game is in its 0 position. Okay? If I fire this coil, which I'm going to try to manually do here, okay, it's moved to its 1 position. There will be one of these switches where you can see that very, very front switch on the far left is now closed. The other 2, actually you only have 1 that's remained open. Okay, so you are basically receiving signal for this reel to turn at this point. It's no longer in its 0 position. All right, as it turns, you can also see, I've just held it in here so you can see, the end of stroke switch, what that does is it takes away the power from the coil, the signal. Okay, so the game receives signal that it needs the coil to fire. It pulls in the plunger, turning the reel, and then once it hits the end of stroke switch, it releases, and it releases turning the reel. Okay, that's what the end of stroke switch does. Now if I fire this to the point where we are at our 9 switch, which should be right here, you can see we now have a different setup. We have the 9 switch has been engaged, the far right switch. Okay, the far right switch being engaged is telling us that on the next point in which this would normally turn, it wants us to turn, give a signal to the next reel in line for scoring. So if this was at, this is at 9 and it gets a point, it's going to turn this back to its 0 position, but also signal to the next reel in line to put a 1 or a 2 or a whatever. Okay? And that's basically how these work. So fire it one more time. Again, you'll be able to see the switches change states. And now they're all back in open. And you're back in your 0 position. So that is the score reel. We got 3 more to clean up here, and then we'll be on to the relay bank. Stay tuned. Alright, so I put together the head onto the cabinet and powered it up just to see if our work has paid off, and it has. So the playfield itself is super filthy. It's barely been touched at all. The bottom, the lower cabinet hasn't been touched at all, and I'll be going through those before we actually work on the playfield itself. But I figured I would show you our progress, and so you can probably hear a relay buzzing in the background, and that's on the lower cabinet or the coin door. But here is our playfield for 1973. It's not in bad condition. I think it will clean up quite well. The colors are pretty vibrant. It's the original pop bumpers, and it just needs a lot of work. But I've been pretty excited, so let's see here. For us demonstrating, so you can hear the coil. So that's definitely in the coin door. So you can see that when I push in right here. See how that goes away? So that's just the spring, and not getting full throw as far as pulling in and engaging the cutoff on that coin door coil. So if we coin up our game, you can see the coil is now fully engaged. That's working fine. Beautiful coin door too. Look how nice that is. That's going to clean up really good. And you can see our score reels. Obviously the back box is all that we've touched, but we have completely gone through the back box, and it shows. So we've got 2 credits in there right now. It must be set on 2, or maybe I tapped it twice. Our game overlay is on, so the game over reset is working appropriately. And if I go ahead and hit the start button, watch our score reels. All set back to 0. We've got our ball kicked out into the trough, and you can see it's set to 5 ball. So for scoring, all of this is pretty trivial, but basically, you know, we're at 0. I hit the 500 switches down here. You got 500. Hit the second one. Sorry, I'm missing you here on the camera. We now got 1,000. Third, 15, 2,000, 2,500. All of it's working good. There's actually not a single switch that's on the playfield that is not registering. Some things are a little bit gummed up, and or a lot gummed up. And these inserts here, these rollovers are chewed up big time, but 100 points. You know, that works perfect. Your others. You know, everything is working the way that it should. Your flippers, they're going to be completely rebuilt. Slingshot, those are all good. Let's show you, we'll drain a ball. Drops it down on the ball count unit, which we cleaned up. Kicks one out. Obviously we're set up with no legs at all right now. Drops down to the ball count. So again, everything is working. Here's a good one you can see up there. Let's get this to turn. So everything is situated in the back box, working the way that we had hoped it would. All the relays, all the credit unit, the ball count unit, the replay unit, all of that is functioning appropriately. And by going through the play field and actuating all the switches and paying attention to what they're doing as far as the score is concerned, we know that the score motor is running appropriately and the reset is running appropriately as far as the relays are concerned. The ball reset is running appropriately. So if I just cycle through the rest of this, you can see we got a special on. So that would be 5,000. That should kick this to 15,170. There's our 15,170. We now have our last ball in play. Or maybe there's a light out. There might be a light out. I haven't done this. So we're now on our last ball of play. We plunge this once. Beautiful sounds too. And again, I haven't touched this chime box at all. So I'm really excited to get into the chime box and start working on that. Should sound even better when I'm done with it. So our last ball, let's see for our reset. We drain, there's our score, and there's our game over. So that's Gulfstream. That's the work that we've done with the back box. Again, this game was not functioning when we received it. It just shows when you break things down completely and really spend some time on them, you can make it work like it should and bring it back to life. So our next battle is the lower cabinet. We have got the lower cabinet pulled on the Gulfstream, and I figured I would just give you a brief rundown of what we're looking at. We've done some very light cleaning just so that we can see things and get to things a little bit easier. We still have a long ways to go. So what we will be doing is addressing all of these relays and different motors and fuse blocks, connectors, all that stuff. So what we're looking at is we got the AC transformer. It gets the line voltage from the wall. You have two outputs. One of the outputs is 6 volts. That will probably be going for the all the lighting. And then you've got your other 24 volts, which will be sent to the coils and your motor for the score motor. All of it's going to be run through your fuse block. You've got your coin counter here. You've got your female Jones plugs, which will be connecting the playfield into, as well as the back box, and also your coin door. Then you have your male side. You have your Jones plugs. Those will be sent up to the back box. We have the score motor, which is going to be receiving information from the relay banks, and that the relay banks are receiving the information from the switches that are on the play field. So the activity that takes place in the play field is sending a signal down to the relays, and then the relays are sending this information to the score motor, and the score motor is doing the computations, like adding 100 points 5 times or 500 points 3 times, whatever it may be. And it does this by rotating all these cams. That's what these are called, are cams. And each cam has its individual switch stack. So as this cam rotates, you have these little notches that will ride in and out of the cam. And that's what's going to create the contact points between the leaf switches. So you got your switch stacks. They're of different sizes, different amounts of switch. switches, and they all do something very specific. So you might have a cam that makes a full rotation as far as its sequence. It might make 2 sequences for a 360-degree turn, or it might make 3, or it might just make 1 sequence, and it depends on the make of the game. It's Bally, Williams, or Gottlieb, or Chicago coin, whatever. So that's the score motor. Very, very important piece, basically the brains of the unit. And then you have your relays, all sorts of different types of relays. You see your ball lock relays. You've got eject relays, reset relays, coin relays. And basically, the way that these work is you have the coil itself, okay? You have the actuator plate, which is this plastic piece, and you have the armature, which is the part that gets pulled in by the coil when it's initiated and it's sent power. Then you have your switch stacks. All right, so your switch stack has the leaf switches going off of it, and those leaf switches will slide into the long part of the leaf switch, will slide into the actuator plate. And what that does is it gives you your contact points. So when that is pulled in, you are making or breaking connection between 2 leaf switches. So this is actually a good example here to show you what's what. So right now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 switches, actually 6, because the one on the far right here, is what we call a make or break switch. And what that means is that right now, with the coil not engaged, we have contact on the far right between two points, okay? And as we push the coil, the armature, in, as if the coil was engaging, it's releasing the contact on the right side, and it begins to make it on the left. And you can see that. So this is its resting position, and this is its fully engaged position. So that's considered a make or break switch. Right beside it on the left, we have a normally closed switch. That normally closed switch sits like this in its resting point, contact's being made. As the coil armature is pulled in by the coil, when it's sent power, it breaks that connection. Then on the far left, or the next one over on our left, is a normally open switch. In fact, the last 3 are all normally open. And so what that means is in its resting state, they have a gap between them. They are not making contact, and therefore no information is being sent through them. When the coil armature is engaged, you get contact between the points. So this is probably as good of a coil as you can get to show someone the difference in switches and what they do. But you have different types of relays, and they all have a specific purpose, and that is our lower cabinet. So what I plan on doing, as you can see, there's all sorts of dirt and grime in between all these little spots that I wasn't able to get. And each one of these relays can be lifted out. They're actually on these nice little rubber standoffs, so that way vibrations from the game, whether it be people nudging or the coils themselves firing, you don't get some false readings that would take place on the switches and engage things when they shouldn't be or separate things when they shouldn't be. So I will be pulling each one of these coils, each one of these relay banks, and we'll be cleaning the wood underneath. We will be tightening any switch stacks that have become loose, okay, because each switch stack has a set of screws that keep it tight to the mounting bracket. And that's very important, because if these are loose, the switches themselves, they can twist, they can turn, and you get differences in the gaps. Now when you do tighten these switches, the switch stacks, you usually have to go back and adjust the switches because your gaps are going to be different. Okay, and that's important to know as well. So we'll be doing that. We'll be cleaning the contacts between all the switches because you do get a buildup of like a little, basically your carbon, and it just, after a while, it'll create issues with the contact points and you might get some intermittent feedback. So that's probably our main thing. We also are going to address things like this, which is basically, at one point in time, a little mouse got in here and had himself a field day. So we've got to address that. Most likely we'll cut it, and I'll use heat shrink and put another piece of wire on there. Try to keep as much of the shielding as I can, because being able to identify these colors in the schematics while reading them is essential. I was spending some time tonight going over the schematics, and it was really good. After a while you get used to reading these electromechanical schematics, which are very different in my mind from solid state units. So anyways, looking forward to doing that. We'll try to probably clean up some of the small rust spots like this as well, and just identify if any of the like for instance the coil springs that would be pulling the armature back out. We want to make sure that those are appropriate. If any of these springs are adjusted too tightly, or if the switch stacks are putting too much pressure when the armature is pulled in, that's when you get your buzzing. And that buzzing is just from the vibration that's taking place. It's not at a solid state, so you have your AC that's changing, 60 times a second. And that's the frequency, and so you're getting that vibration of it being in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out, and you don't want that. So it's fine tuning at its best. But that's the unit. Again, all of this is working. We've just got to clean it up and get it to perform at its peak. We have officially finished the control board on the bottom of the cabinet. As you can see, it had cleaned up quite a bit. Where it was super grimy and nasty, you can now read things appropriately. Everything has been removed from the board itself, and it's been thoroughly cleaned underneath. It came out pretty good. Still have to do some touch-ups on the wires that were chewed by the mice. But overall, I'm pretty happy with how it came out. So, right from the start, again, everything was removed from the board and cleaned under. That definitely shows. It really helps too when you're trying to troubleshoot things and identify wire color. It would blow your mind to know how much different it is trying to identify wire colors, having a nice clean backdrop. That makes a huge difference. A lot of the units that were super rusty and like all these fuse clips, they were still solid. They still have tons of spring left in them. I was going to replace them and put just a block on the bottom and rewire it, but they're working great. And after cleaning them up with some Scotch-Brite, I like how they turned out. They don't look brand new, but it is original, and they're shiny. They're making really good connection They still have that springiness. I just thought it was worth keeping that original fuse block. Our little coin counter cleaned up pretty good. That was kind of nasty. Let's see here. Our score motor. That was a big one. And it didn't come out perfect, but in comparison to what we were working with from the beginning, it's night and day difference. All the notches were cleaned out. You know, the leaf switches were all attended to, making sure that they were tight inside their stacks. We put some oil on our window here. So the score motor, like I said, not perfect by any means. Still certain areas where I think I could get better. But certainly a hell of a lot better than what it was. So that's all good there. Then we have all of our switch stacks, all of our relays. Now with the relays, again, they were removed from the board, and then we cleaned all of the activator plate. We attended to the springs that were on the relays themselves, making sure that they had that full throw, both when the armature was pulled in and the release from it. You know, we wanted that to be strong, and we didn't want any half states as far as the switches were concerned. All of the switches have all been addressed, both the gaps and the cleaning of the contacts. Every single switch was cleaned thoroughly. You might be able to see a little bit. It's kind of a pain in the ass. Well, right there you can see. See how there's some silver on each one of those? You can see the silver here, silver there, and silver there. All that's the clean part. The black that you see around it, that is what it was before. So quite a bit of difference, and that's where you're going to have your contact points. And we had to adjust these a little bit. You know, this is your dual stage relay. So you have two coils. You have one that pulls it in. Okay, the armature gets pulled in. And then you have this little relay clip that comes up and locks it in place. Okay, so this is locked in place. It's not dropping back like these other ones here. So that moves back and resets into its normal position on its own. But with this, you have it locked, and then when it receives the signal, this coil here pulls in this armature and releases. Okay, so you have the two working in tandem together, locking and releasing, locking and releasing. So that click that you hear, that doesn't happen by accident. You have to adjust the leaf switches against the activator plate, and you have to adjust the springs so that your tension is just enough to engage, but at the same time has the same amount or the equivalent to be able to release, to be able to completely let that armature plate dive back in to its home position. And that is some finesse back and forth. I had to play with that quite a bit. These leaf switches were not adjusted right. They were bad. You know, you didn't hear any click. It would go back, and it would kind of go back like this. That's kind of what you saw. So it would be in its click position. I'd pull this armature plate in, and it would slide back like that. And so when I heard that, I knew I was getting a nice snappiness, which is what you want. And the same thing with this one over here. Pulls it in. And this one, a little bit more important, you have your make or break switch there on the end, which again is essential to have it get that snappiness, that full throw, because you have a lot less play inside of the switch stacks and the contacts. So if you're only getting that type of movement, you know, you're not getting your full throw. You want that thing to go all the way in, lock, and then completely come back. And you can see again, I think in my other video I showed it as well, when I'm pulling in, it's basically making contact 50% of the way through its throw. So I'm pulling in, and you can see it's wanting to release the switch on the right, and then starts making contact with the left about halfway through. So again, that's what you want to look for. Some of these two specifically, they were nasty. They had been pissed on with mice, and I cleaned these so-so. I took out 200 grit sandpaper and buffed off the spots. Believe it or not, this is all clean and all flush. It has just discolored the steel there. So same thing with this. And what I probably will do at some point, because I think this is going to bother me, it doesn't look great, I have a feeling I'm going to disassemble the switch stack and remove the mounting plate, and I probably will put that in a tumbler, and maybe even after I hit it with a Dremel tool and a grinder or whatnot, just to clean that up better. And then I plan on getting a few of these nice little rubber standoffs. Those are nice. They have the center part of them is steel, so the threads of the screw, they aren't touching it at all, and that's probably why they last 40-50 years. But they do make a huge difference, and you can see the movement. Oops, let me see if I can get this. This isn't a good example. See that movement there? I mean, I'm really rocking this. And it's just giving, and that's what you want. You get that the same thing over here on these guys. You know? Again, clean switch stacks. There you can see clean contacts. So that is the control board. And that's the lower cabinet. We still have the chime box to work on. We still have the coin door to address. And then we'll be headed onto the lower part of the cabinet, or the lower part of the playfield rather. And I'm looking forward to jumping in on that. But man, that board looks a lot better. All right, folks. All right, we are looking at the bottom side of the playfield on our Williams Gulfstream, and I figured I would just do a quick video to show you some of the issues that I've noticed right off the bat, as well as some areas that we're going to want to take a closer look at and determine whether or not they're up to par. So what we've got is our flipper coils, okay, 2 flippers. We have our normal relays, which we've seen in previous videos. We have our large bank relay, okay. We have our kickouts on the side, the saucers. We have our 3 pop bumpers. We have our rollovers, top lane rollovers. We have our insert lighting. A couple more relays. We've got Jones plugs. And let's see if there's anything else. That looks about it. So the first couple things that I noticed as far as issues, let's start with the most important part of the game, our flippers. We have movement, a lot of movement. Okay, that's no good. That takes away from our power to our flippers, and it causes a lot of wear. So what we're going to do is we'll remove this assembly. We will pull these sleeves, because I noticed these are all steel sleeves, original steel sleeves. We'll replace them with nylon. We'll take a look at the link. We'll determine if the plunger is still in decent shape or if that needs to be changed out. Your coil stops, we'll take a look at those, probably replace them. The pawl, and our end of stroke unit. The end of stroke switch, I've actually noticed that has got some pretty good pitting. So we're going to clean it up and see whether or not we can get a nice flat surface area to make good contact. If we can't, we'll replace the end of stroke switch. Let's see, on the other flipper, you can see how dark this wrapper is compared to the last one. That's because it's gotten hot at some point. And when these heat up, lots of times they start to choke the sleeve, okay? The windings of the coil start to grab a hold of that sleeve, and it wouldn't surprise me if we can't even remove that sleeve from the coil. But we're going to test it, and we're going to determine what it ohms out and whether or not it's still in spec. And if necessary, we'll replace the coil. And if we can't get that sleeve out, we'll probably replace it regardless. And again, we'll look at links, plunger. This is funny too. Look how much movement we have here. Let's see. See how sloppy that is? So that type of stuff, again, takes away from power, reliability, and longevity. So we'll address all that, as well as the end of strokes. On our relay bank, we are basically looking at a bunch of switch stacks, and I do mean a bunch, okay? Rows and rows of switches, and their corresponding coils that are their relay, and they are all mounted on this bracket, okay? And this whole bracket here, the relay bank, what it does is, let's say that you're on the top side of the playfield and you're initiating contact with switches. You might hear something like that take place, and these switch stacks start becoming activated. You start having switches that are normally closed. Let's say like that switch right up there. Let's see if I can get in here to show you. So let's say, oops, you can see those are closed right now. All of a sudden now they're open. The ones below them that were normally open, now they're closed. So that's taking place on the top side of the playfield, or wherever the switches are initiated. And then you have this giant coil down here, and this is why they call it a reset bank. The giant coil at the end of the ball or end of the game or the start of a new game, that will pull in and reset all of these individual coils and all of these switches back into their home state, home position, and it'll do it all at once. So you have 7, relays here. You have, I think, 11 on this set, and that's all going to be reset from that one coil. Now you can see the size of this coil and judge it by comparison of the size of the coil that's firing your flippers. So that little coil is firing your flippers, which you get pretty good power from. Look at the size of that. But it's got a heavy-duty job. So what we'll do is look at all the gaps. First thing we'll make sure is that all of the switch stacks are tight. Okay, we'll tighten down all the switch stacks, and then we will determine whether or not the gaps are appropriate for each one of the switches, the contacts, and we will clean them, and if need be, we will adjust them. So that's what we're going to do with the relay bank. We're also going to pull, again, these coils, clean the plungers, look at the stops, and check the sleeves as well. Any of these pivot points here, where you have the E-clips, we will address these as well. Make sure that they have the appropriate spacers and that there's no binding. Okay, that's for the reset bank. Then you have our side kickouts, basically the saucers. And the first thing I noticed with this is just how nasty it was, and the fact that it is really making a lot of contact with the side. And you can actually hear the contact that it's making. The coil itself, the plunger, it's super nasty. We'll clean that all up. The armature itself is actually bent, and so we'll address that. The spring is going to be removed. It'll probably be redressed, giving a little more tension because we're not getting a full throw. Okay, if I go slow enough, you'll see when it goes back, you still have that much. That takes away from power for the kick out. At the same time, you have your switch, and this switch contact's super dirty. We'll clean those. You can see the bottom contact. See that little part right there that's attached to the bottom leaf? That's when your ball sits in the saucer. It pushes that down into the contact, makes contact, and tells the coil to fire. Okay? So we will address that as well, because most likely that is not sitting appropriately and it's going to need to be cleaned up. So we'll do that on both sides. We'll take out this, clean the plastic, get it all looking good. And our pop bumpers, we have 3 of them. We're going to disassemble them, remove it down to the bakelite board. We'll check the springs in the pop bumpers. They actually seem pretty good. We will take a look at cleaning the spoon on the pop bumpers, and we will be, let's see if I can show you the spoon here. You can see the spoon right there. Okay. So basically, this needle, which is attached to the playfield, or the skirt of the pop bumper, as the skirt of the pop bumper is pushed, it sends this up into the spoon, making contact with that switch right there, which you can see is really grimy. So we'll clean that up, we'll gap it appropriately, replace it if necessary. And when it makes contact, and we'll really want to make sure that the needle is in the perfect center of the spoon. So no matter where it's hitting, no matter where the ball is hitting on the skirt of the pop bumper on the top side of the playfield, we are going to get the proper action and the proper response from the switch. So as the ball hits the skirt of the pop bumper, the top side of the playfield, it engages the switch, which pulls in the coil, and then you can see it releasing. And basically you have a secondary switch that's on the top here, and that becomes engaged, and that's your scoring switch. Okay? So that's what that does. We'll address that, we'll look at the sleeve, and we'll just make sure that that whole assembly is working like it should. With your relays, we'll go through and clean up all the contacts of the switches, and just like before, we'll look at these plates, look at the armature, make sure that that's all good. A couple of these springs I did notice will have to be redressed. I'll probably have to cut out a couple of coils because they had almost no pullback. You weren't getting full throw. So we'll address that. Our bulbs, we'll replace all the bulbs. We'll make sure the sockets are making good contact, so we're not getting intermittent connections. We will clean underneath the bulb and the insert, because those are nasty. Replace these with LEDs if we can. These are regular 44 style bayonet bulbs. We'll address our rollovers in the same way as far as from the top side. We'll initiate the switch, okay? Doing this with a ball lots of times helps because sometimes with your finger you don't get the actual action of it. But we'll address that, make sure that we have the proper gap and that it's registering the way that it needs to. Our Jones plugs, let's see here. See how nasty those are? Those are super, super dirty. Got a lot of corrosion on them. We will hit them hardcore with some Scotch-Brite, and that will help our connection. So these might be going to the head. Actually, they are going to the head. We'd have the head and then also the lower part of the cabinet. All of that's going to be talking. Playfield, lower control board, and the head all need to be able to receive and send information appropriately. So we'll address those Jones plugs. And I think that is mostly it. It's in good shape. It's just really dirty. All of the wiring, as far as the solder points on the leaf switches, those all look pretty good. It still has, all the wiring has pretty good color, so if you needed to troubleshoot this in the schematic, that would help you tremendously. I'm pretty impressed as far as the condition of everything. Even the ground braid looks to be intact and not really fooled with, so that's a plus. Oh, one thing I didn't mention either. On the top side of the playfield, you have these rollovers. And this rollover is like a button, almost like a push button. They are chewed up beyond belief on the top side, and I will get some pictures and video of that as well. This is the bottom side of it. We have new ones. So we will install those new ones, and then we will adjust the switches appropriately. Here is a perfect example of a coil that is overheated. So you can see how dark that wrapper is. All right. And what's taken place, slowly but surely, is as this heats up, it starts to melt the coating that is on the windings of the coil. And as it starts to melt, it starts to short. And so it becomes hotter and hotter and hotter rather than being forced to go through the coil loops, the coil wounds. And the result is a burnt up coil that begins to choke the sleeve. So this is an old steel sleeve or aluminum, and what I'll show you, what you should have is something like this. So this is the exact same coil. This is a new one. You can see how bright this is. And here is a nylon sleeve that you can push in and out. You can pull this out, no problem, okay? I mean, the sleeve just slides right out. It has no pinching, no resistance of any kind, but it fits in there nice and smooth and snug, so there's no slop or anything like that. Then you have, going back to the burnt one, if I push this as hard as I possibly can, no matter what I do, I don't care if you turn this upside down and push it down on the bottom side of the playfield, you get nothing. And that's because the coil, the windings on the coil have choked this sleeve to the point where it will not separate. And what you have as a result with your plunger is that your plunger is restricted, and your plunger starts grinding on the inside of this coil sleeve, and it makes a ton of mess. It has an extreme amount of restriction and a lot of heat. All of those are bad attributes to have for flipper coils. All right, it is late, about 11:30, and we now have a completed bottom side of our playfield for Williams Gulfstream. So bear with me as I stumble through this, but I'll give you a quick breakdown of the things that we've done. So we have completely disassembled every mechanical assembly that is on this playfield. The flippers, the relays, the relay reset bank, not relay reset bank. Again, I told you I was going to stumble. The reset bank coils, the armatures, your slingshots, the kickouts, your pop bumpers, your rollovers, your relays, and the same thing on this side. All of that was removed. The assembly itself was broken down. All of the parts were thoroughly cleaned. They were degreased. They were sanded down or polished up with Scotch-Brite if necessary. Parts were replaced. Coils were replaced. Anything that we needed to do to get it both looking nice and functioning nice. That was done for every assembly. Let's see here. Every single part. Along with it, we had issues, and again, never mind that. We had issues with stripped out mounting holes. All of those stripped out mounting holes were addressed with wood skewers or wood toothpicks and wood glue, and then they were cut flush, they let dry, and the assemblies were then reassembled. So basically it was like going into brand new wood. So all of these assemblies, like this whole, both flippers were completely stripped out. The mounting holes were terrible. The mounting holes for here, for the big reset bank, especially on this left side, they were nearly non-existent. I mean, this number 6 screw or number 8 screw head could go into the hole. That's how big that was. It was bad. So, and that's definitely not how I wanted it, and I knew I had to address it, so that's what we did. That made a huge difference. Going over this playfield, one of the common themes was misuse of hardware and the wrong hardware. So I saw pan head screws, number 6, number 8, maybe number 10. I saw regular slot screws. I saw Phillips. I saw hex heads. I saw 1/2 inch. I saw 3/4 inch. I mean, every type of oddball piece of hardware you could imagine I found on this playfield. And of course, we replaced it. So what we're working with now is everything either has a number 6 or a number 8 screw, which it should have. If the screw should have locking washers, they have it. if the screw needed to be a nylon nut, it's got it. If it needed retaining clips, it has them. If it needed washers behind the retaining clip, it has them. I just can't tell you how much was completely missing. I mean, switch stacks, for instance. There's one switch stack that I had to replace one of the screws on, and I couldn't find the black one, but I did find the right length and right thread and size. So, you know, that was missing on a pop bumper, and what it did was it wore down the blades. I mean, it messed up the blades so much. It was such a pain in the ass to get back into order, and it wore down the needle on the skirt where the spoon engages it. I mean, things like that were constant. They were everywhere. It was just a mess. You know, for instance, setups like this had the wrong spring. They had it to the point where, you know, something would you'd go bring it back down, but it would creep back like this. You know, it had no snap. What are some of the other things that I noticed that were just horrendous? Oh, the big coils here. The big coils, and they're some of the largest plungers and end stops I've ever seen. But they had the most grease inside of the sleeve that I have ever seen. I mean, it looked like somebody just took a Q-tip full of Vaseline and shoved it into the coil sleeve. You know, it was laughable. Again, these washers, they were missing. Both these. The lockdown, the spacers here. Let's see if I can get you a good view. There you go. So those spacers, they help with both mounting and vibration. So they didn't want this to be causing issues with the rest of what was going on in the playfield, whether it be switches or just noise, because these are huge coils that are engaging to reset that bank of switches. These foam pieces and the rubber were basically non-existent. You know, they had been worn down so much, they were so rusty. All of that stuff, and I say rust because there was a lot of piss residue, if you will, from mice on this machine, and you wouldn't know it now. It's very, very clean. Of course, we replaced all the bulbs. Those all have 47s now. We'll do LEDs here coming up. Anytime that you see the black tape that I have right now, and there's a fair amount of it, and the reason being is because the cloth wrap might have had, it was either starting to be broken away or it had been eaten away somewhat by mice, and I want to go back and address those with proper shrink wrap. So I have basically tagged off all of these spots where I feel they need to be addressed. You can see there's about 4 of them down there on the main wiring loom. So we will address those. All right, we have got our Gulfstream, quote unquote, on blocks. And here's the reason. So over here, this is a nice seam. Okay? You have both your front and side panels coming together smooth Nice and tight. There is nearly no gap. From the top to the bottom. This panel has no movement. It is tightly sealed, and it's sealed two different ways. You have the internal gusset, which is right here. That runs from here all the way down to the bottom of the cab, and that is both stapled in and it's glued in. Okay, then you have glue between the panels where you have this joist, and you also have this piece of steel. It's harder to see that, but that's stapled in on both sides as well. Okay, so that's what a good one should look like. There's no movement. It's glued in, it's stapled in, it's holding the two pieces together. And then you have your bolt mounting bracket. This is your leg bolt plate, which is right down there. Let me see if I can. There you go. How about that? So there you have both your leg bolts coming from the outside all the way through the gusset and into the leg bolt plate. Okay, that's what you want. So then, let's look at our bad one. And it doesn't take long to see that there are some issues. So we have the gap that is noticeable. Okay. Right down the whole thing. Gets tighter down towards the bottom. But basically, from just about above where the legs would sit, you have it starting to widen out. And then you have this. You see that movement? You can see how much that gap is opening. Okay? That amount of movement is dangerous, especially if you're going to be moving a pin and you're going to have the public utilizing a pin. So we want to address that before it gets worse. It has been unmolested, so no one has tried to fix it previously, which is a good thing because nobody's boogered it up with finish nails or screws or crap staples. And so what we're going to do, we've already taken off the leg, we have it mounted up, and we are going to probably swing that coin door open. The gusset will come out. It's not attached to this board, the front panel, at all on this side. We'll remove this plate and we will separate and clean in between the joint, if at all possible. We will apply our wood glue and we will clamp. Okay, we'll put two clamps, one from this side to this side and then one from front to back, and we will basically close this seam tight, allowing it to dry. Once it's closed, we will reinstall our gusset, which you can even see just with my thumb. I'm moving that. You can see it breaking away. So we'll reinstall the gusset and we will reinstall this other plate. And by doing that, after about 24 hours, we should have a solid corner and a solid joint. All right, we have removed the coin door for better lighting and easier access. We've also taken off a few of the switch stacks that are on the inside of the cabinet on this left-hand side. And we have basically popped open our joint. And you can see that's fully separated. It's got a little bit of tension because of the other side still being mounted in. But we have a nice clean joint. We've taken off anything that was going to prevent us from getting a tight seal. And we will be putting wood glue on this inside. Okay, all the way up on that bead. And we will be doing the same on the inside of here, all the way down. Let me slide over here. And you can see, again, that's completely removed, okay? And it's all been cleaned, so we have no reason that we can't get a nice solid joint again. And we've removed all of the staples, so there's nothing restricting us. Okay, those were going through the gusset into this front panel. Those have been removed. I've got a wrench that's just propping this up, holding it so I can show you folks here. And one of the areas that I wanted to show you as well, you basically have the leg bolt plate. This is the original. Now look how many threads you get in there. You'd be lucky to get about 3 threads. Now these also have quite a bit of wiggle room. They've been bent. You can see that bend. And they're kind of stripped. So because we've already had the issue as far as the board coming off, I'm going to replace it with this. Now look at the thickness on that. You get about 6, maybe 7 threads. Much, much heavier duty. And what I plan on doing is gluing the seam, okay, using clamp bars to hold it in, both lengthwise, the vertical and the horizontally, and then installing this leg plate right over the existing gusset holes. And so then we will, and by installing this, you can see the mounting holes. We're also going to have screws going in, 3 on this side, 3 on this side. So between the new glue and the heavier duty leg plate, we should have no more issues. So this is the proper way to redo a panel that is starting to loosen up or come off. But again, you want to get that joint clean, because if you don't, you're going to get a lot of restriction. Alright, so we currently have our whole corner glued up, and we have the bar clamps clamping down, doing their job. So we have one that is the full length vertical, and that's to pull the front plate or front board in, which needed to be done first, and you needed to seat it with the bottom panel, which was a little bit of a pain in the ass, but we got it. And then we have this front one, and that's pulling the 2 side rails, or side panels, in. So you can see our joint here, and it is nearly perfect. There's a little bit of height difference with the 2 pieces of wood, but I left it up top to keep down below even. So that's just a little bit of glue there. But our joint is pretty tight, and I'm just going to see if I can't show you the bottom, because the bottom looks pretty good too. And there's the bottom. So you can see, you know, that's not a big gap. That's pretty tight. And we put glue basically around this side here and on this side here. So we'll let that dry overnight. Get my fat ass up. And anytime you have an opportunity, use either super thick cardboard or some type of paneling or a piece of wood, don't clamp directly onto the cabinet, and don't make it small. Try to utilize as much surface area when you're clamping as you can, and that'll keep you from damaging the cabinet. Also gives you the best results for pulling it in evenly, which again can be a pain in the ass when you have to fit it with this bottom panel. So here you can see, now the front part you have a little bit of gap only because we broke a piece of wood off when we were pulling this gusset off. But the bottom part, you can see, is nice and tight. It's seating in there properly all the way to the floor. You can see the little bit of bead of glue still. So we got glue all along this edge and all along the inside here. You can see some glue there, right up until the top. So we've got good results. And again, let me remove this to show you how this is going to sit, the leg plate. Oops. Alright, so basically, so I'm going to swap hands here. This plate is going to seat just like that. And it's going to give us access, original access to the holes, okay? And then we'll put screws in on both sides of this panel. You know, just half-inch hex heads or whatnot. So, between our gluing and the new bracket, we should have a nice tight seam that will be good for the rest of this pin's life. So 24 hours has passed. We have taken the clamps off, and take a look at our seam. Right from the top all the way down. We have a nice tight seam. And then you look, I've installed the bracket, the larger of the two brackets, on the back side, and you can see the barrel through the hole, perfectly lined up. There's hole number 2 with the barrel, and again, that's our seam. So that's a nice tight seam. It's flush at the bottom. There's not excess glue. Got a little bit of touch-up basically you can do here to blend this all in. But even if you get close, and you know, this top panel was what originally, before we even started touching it, you know, just with one finger you could move that, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch, maybe a little more. So that seam has come together real nice. Okay, then on our top side, you can see we're lined up pretty good there. And there's our gusset, and there is our installed new bracket. So we went from this with about 3 threads on each bolt, and just two bolts going through directly into the gusset, nothing going into the side panels or front panel, to being attached to the front panel, the side panel, and the gusset, and then having about 6 or 7 threads. So a drastic difference there, a drastic improvement. And again, our gusset is nice and tight, glued in against both panels all the way up. You can see a tiny bit of bead of glue there. And all we have to do now is reinstall our switches for the flipper button, our start button, which we have the wiring harness right there. And then put back in our coin door. And I'm going to go ahead and install the leg, and I'll take another quick video, but I'm very happy how this one came out. I've done a couple of these, and this one by far was the best results. Again, from the side panel, all pretty even. You know, you're not seeing one panel jut out more than the other. You get a tiny, tiny bit of the front panel on this very, very top. But that's what you hope for. So I'll give you one more with the legs attached, and you can be the judge. We have reinstalled the leg, and everything looks good and solid. I did have to switch out the bolt length because the difference in the threads wasn't quite what I wanted. They were just barely to the end, where now you can see I have a good amount of threads all the way through, and the whole mounting plate is nice and secure. Okay. And the leg is sitting nice and flush. I mean, it really came out nice. So I'll probably get the 3-inch bolts with the proper head. So this is kind of like that acorn style head that pinball machines have, so they're not sharp. So we'll get those from a supplier, but I had to run to the store and grab these so they would work. And they do, they fit great. But they do look a little different. But man, is this a lot more secure. And this whole panel, I mean, you don't have to worry about moving this machine anymore. Once you paint that up, you won't even know there's a seam there. Everything that you're seeing on this side, that's just broken away chipped wood and faded. Okay, and then this is where you just barely see some of the seam. And then you can see the glue in between the seam. And again, it was nice and just the right amount of glue. It wasn't dripping, it wasn't causing a lot of unnecessary gunk and mess. But so we'll reassemble the coin door and the switches and get the playfield back in this. Alright, we have the playfield installed back on the game, and I have gone through and tested everything as far as switches are concerned. I've checked the assemblies, and everything is still working the way that it should. So that's a big plus. Lots of times when you do a lot of work, you will have to double back and address some things that kind of get messed up along the way. And so that wasn't the case this time, which is nice. But our playfield, as far as color and condition, it's not bad. You know, we still have a lot of nice vibrant colors, and even with the dirt, you can see that it should clean up nicely. And there's small cupping on the inserts, specifically the ones right down here, and again, very, very light, so that it doesn't affect the ball trajectory much, which is nice. For a game this age, this is extremely minor cupping. We do have a decent amount of wear. It's in spots that it doesn't look like it's going to be too bad, but I believe we're going to color match this to the best of our ability after it's cleaned up. And you can see little spots like that. You just see how dirty this playfield is. I mean, that is caked on dirt. In fact, you can see the line where the flippers were sitting for so long. Undone, unused. Isn't that crazy? Of course your rubbers, I mean these rubbers are, you know, they're old. They've lost all the elasticity. They're cracking. They're crusty. Let's see. A little bit more wear here. Again, planking, it's there, but it's not bad. It's relatively smooth. Hasn't affected much of the paint. And I'm just glad that we got the vibrant colors. A lot of the wear spots are, you know, around the inlanes, your pop bumpers. All of the pop bumpers still have their little mylar pieces around the skirts, and that's intact. They're actually not lifted, which is pretty amazing. And it's nice because it didn't mess up the paint around them. That is oftentimes the case. The plastics, you know, they're all super dirty. They're stained. They're going to need to be cleaned. You know, spots like this, it wouldn't surprise me if that again was piss from mice. And the same thing for up in this area. I mean, that was a constant for this whole machine. The mice were everywhere in it. This whole top piece, we'll take this whole thing off and we'll sand it down, and we'll probably repaint the pink. And we'll just make sure that there's no, you know, gouges, no rough spots, and if necessary we'll smooth them out. All these plastics will come off. The whole playfield will be stripped, and that'll allow us to do the best job as far as any reconditioning of the playfield. Of course, you're going to have major cleaning to get the dirt off, to get the grime. All of these rollovers, these button rollovers, I think there's 3 of them, you can see they've all been nibbled on by our friendly mice friends. This one's not bad. That's what it should kind of look like, although it's super gunky. But check this one out down here. Isn't that nice? So, again, lots of dirt, and just areas that you know are going to clean up, and when you're done, it's going to look sharp. The shooter lane, super dirty. That's going to have to be sanded. We'll clean that up, because you're not going to be able to get the years of caked on dirt out of that without sanding. So we'll do that. But overall, it should come out nice. And again, with the touch-up spots, you know, they're going to be, you're going to be able to see them after we're done, but I'm just trying to protect it a little bit. Even if we don't put a finish over it, but with this playfield, because of how easy it is to remove and how simple it is to remove all the top assemblies, plastics, I think we might put a clear on it, or put some type of sealant to lock in the paint, any touch-ups that we do. And whether it be lacquer or clear, I'm not sure, but once this is situated, it should stay nice. And it'll be a very presentable title for Gulfstream. Like all this, you know that most likely is just piss spots that ended up burning through the finish. I did play a quick game or two and just confirmed that all the assemblies were working appropriately. I was pretty surprised at the transformation as far as how quick, you know, your kickouts were, your slingshots, and the flippers even. Everything was nice and snappy, but you don't want to play too much on a play field that's in this rough a shape, even with a brand new ball, because it's just going to continue to eat away at the wood and cause more damage. The plastic posts, I haven't mentioned those. These look to be in really nice shape, which is great. So we'll be able to take out all of them when we strip down the top side of the playfield, and we'll be able to polish them all up, clean them, and reuse them. I like the color. Again, nothing on this playfield is, you know, like it's just got its vibrant color still. It's not faded. Our stand-up targets in the back will strip down. But man, look at the difference there. You know? So that's what we're working with topside. Again, clean all the gunk, clean all the dirt, strip it down. All the posts, the plastics, all that's going to need to be cleaned thoroughly. We'll install new rollovers. We will install new rubber kits. We will install probably new pop bumper skirts. Looks like we got a mix match one. I don't know if that's normal or not. I'll have to look. We will do our touch-ups as we go along. Once we get the playfield cleaned up, we'll pull the top side of the playfield, the metal, and we will address that. We'll sand it down. We'll repaint it. Again, some of that stuff will have to wait until we're in warmer weather. The actual apron is nice. And somebody at some point put a sticker here, but I can clean that residue off. And we still have the Williams emblem. So, in reality, this should be a very nice machine when we're done. And of course, we'll wax it up. And the cool thing about this game as well is that it is a Williams Add-A-Ball. And if you want to look that up, go ahead, because I'll get into the details on gameplay and such at a later time, but check out Add-A-Ball games. They're very, very interesting. I thought I would just give you guys a quick show of the playfield in its entirety before we get into some hardcore cleaning. And by stripping the playfield, of course, you give yourself the best access to fully getting into areas that otherwise would be unobtainable. And then when you go to wax it, it's easier to wax. Even beforehand for us, the touch-ups, they're going to be made, you know, 10 times easier because there's nothing in the way. So instead of having, you know, a stand-up target here and a post here, or any of this type of stuff, working with the bottom side of the pop bumpers, having that all completely removed allows us to, you know, lay our hand flat, get good balance when we're doing things, and really clean under areas that have dirt. Because, you know, you can leave these, but this right here, this second half of the black around here, and all this wood, you know, that has just tons and tons of dirt, that's covered
with that bottom part of the pop bumper. So if you don't remove it, you're really not getting everything, and you're certainly not protecting everything. We got some rough areas that we're going to hopefully fix some of this woodwork here. We'll probably put some Bondo and paint it again, build up that edge. We'll see how it goes. You know, having all of your slingshots removed really allows you to get in here. The only thing that we'll need to do once we go ahead and try to seal the playfield after we do our touch-ups is we will take, you know, little pieces of paper towel or whatnot and push down all of these rollovers so that they're completely hidden. And then again, we'll paper towel each one of these holes. Like, these are the button rollovers, you know, big stand-up targets. Any holes you want to plug them. So we will do that. Get the flipper bushings here. I'll probably drop down. I did want to show you, because I took the liberty to doing a little bit of cleanup just to show you what you can do. So here, this is the right hand side of the apron. Now this is the cleaner half of the apron. This is after I vacuumed, and that's basically, there's nothing loose here, okay? No matter how much you wipe this with your hand, you're not going to clean up anything. You could take a perfectly white towel, start wiping it, and nothing's going to come up, okay? So, but it's before we've touched it with any product for cleaning. And then this was the rougher half of the apron underneath. So if you go back and look at the previous video, you will see how much of a drastic change that is. And this is smooth like glass. This has basically revealed the finish. The lacquer is still intact. You can see that shine, that shear. That wouldn't take place if you were down to wood or if you're down to just paint. Okay, that comes from still having a finish on it, and a nice finish. And this, you know, this whole area like here and here where you have severe planking, and again I say severe, but in reality that's the most severe that it gets for this machine, but that's not bad for a machine this old. But this was where all the mice nests were, and where they had done the majority of their piss damage, as I like to refer to it as. And yet still, once we cleaned up all this sandpaper-like grit, I mean, you know, that's incredible. It's just, no matter what you do, all of this is just caked on, and I mean, it literally feels like 100 grit sandpaper. And this was the clean side. And you end up getting a finish like that. This is non-waxed. This is before any wax. Okay? This is just removing the dirt, the grime, the buildup. And then if you take a look at that line that separates what I've done from what I haven't touched. I mean, this right here, it's amazing. The you know, the grittiness. You can hear it. And then you go over here. I mean, it's really in person. It's quite amazing, the difference. So, again, wanted to show you that and let you be the judge of how you can basically turn around a machine that otherwise looks like it's in dumpster condition as far as dirt and grime. Don't forget our flipper tan lines. Alright, we have cleaned up the top side of the playfield, and it's come out very, very nice. I was surprised at how much sheen and finish it still has. The paint in most spots is still very well protected, and the colors are just as vibrant as can be. Of course, we've stripped everything off, all the mechanisms, all the posts, pop bumpers, rollovers, lane guides. Basically, the only areas that we haven't removed of the whole apron that's off are these small side wood rails, which those might be coming off here. I think these top side ones, both this and this, will be coming off so we can refinish the arch. Right now we just have little pieces of paper towel holding down the rollovers so I could do a proper cleaning without that interfering much. Again, all the mylar around the pop bumpers 100% intact and still laid down flush. Which is really, really impressive, because once this stuff starts flaking up and peeling off, it brings all the paint with it. So to have it intact fully with no flaking of any kind, no peeling, no bubbling, that is definitely a rarity for a game this age. But all the colors are just super vibrant. Everything really, really popped. I mean, this whole area felt like sandpaper when I started. And now, I mean, you can see, look at that sheen. I mean, it looks wet, which is what you're hoping for. That means you still have a nice finish on there. All of the cream areas came out good. You know, are they as white as they once were? Probably not. There's a little bit of staining. You can see the difference underneath the post, how white it was at one point. But the colors they're not far off. And again, this is 1973. The green came out super nice. The blacks are jet black. All the details, you know, the regular wood finish, you could just see the sheen that's on there. It's got a nice glossy finish. Of course, all of our stand-up targets are dropped down. The shooter lane was cleaned up. I have yet to sand it down here. I think I still may, although it did clean up better than I anticipated. But I may still sand it. But it's not bad. Of course, any spots like this, again, that's where the P sat, burned through the finish. All of your inserts have just slight cupping. The shooter lane, this was a really, really nasty ball line where the ball traveled constantly. And you can see it's still there. Kind of worn into the wood a little bit. But you gotta look for it. It cleaned up nice. And just that finish, that wet finish, is what you're really hoping you still have when you start cleaning a pin. Especially at this age. Because it's not uncommon for it to be worn right to wood, or right to the paint on a lot of areas. And anytime that you see that shimmering of light, you know you have some protective qualities there. But look at that color. You can go back to the original video and take a look at what we started with. I was pretty impressed, especially under this apron. I mean, the apron was, that was just ridiculously nasty. But it's all got that really nice, super wet look to it. Very, very happy how this came out. Obviously, we haven't done any touch-ups, so those will be coming up. But it just shows you what you can do when you strip down the playfield fully and you take your time and clean it the right way. It is amazing what you can bring back to life. So stay tuned for the touch-ups. They are coming. We will be doing those with the acrylics. So we have completed the touch-ups on the 1973 Williams Gulfstream. It was a bit of an amateur fest. This was my first attempt at playfield touch-ups, and I'll point them out to you here. So we touched up spots in the teal color. Those actually were our first touch-ups, and most of what you're seeing that I'll point out for touch-ups was down to bare wood. So in some cases we actually started priming with white paint before we laid down our color. You can see some more right up here, right there, right there. So that was the first color that I put down and thought that came out decent. Then we put down our skin tone. Which came out even better. We were pretty happy with that. And then I went on to mess up about 5 times in a row and spend about a day's worth of effort on the purple. And right here is a good example of eventually how well we were able to blend it in. So if I get closer, you could see touch up here, touch up there. Again, this was all down to bare wood. Touch up there, here, 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 and here. This part's a little shaded, you can't see that well. So I was very, very happy with how that came out. Again, around this post, all of this down to bare wood. You know, standing back, I'm in the playing position right now. You could tell that blended in very, very well. Then I got a little confident and decided I was going to start recreating some completely missing artwork, which was more to do with lines and segments.
And so you see this over here, that's factory. This over here, about 50% of that is not. So basically from this point down, that point is missing, was missing down to bare wood. You can see the touch up, that's actually still drying. We created half of this line from basically this black part back. We created the whole line from up to here all the way over. All the purple that's on this side, with the majority of it anyways, there were some blotches there that were left. The line segment that cuts through here and goes up towards the top, that was all recreated. And a little bit of the line segment that goes here across, that was recreated. So if you compare the two, I think we did a decent job. Then I took it a step further and I started going over the inserts. All the inserts have had the black redone, and that's why that looks nice and bright. It looks full. It's what you would expect. I've got some before and after shots of the playfield to show you as well. You can see up here the same thing with the special. Basically everything around all of these inserts, there was, because they're somewhat sunken from age and difference in humidity and storing and whatnot, the wood was showing around the insert, the plastic insert, and then some of the ink that was showing as well. Basically the ball rolling into there kind of wears down the paint around the insert, so that starts becoming missing, and then the paint on the actual insert starts becoming missing. And you can see, even if I get up close, oops, blocking your light, those all look pretty good. So I was happy where that came out. Here's a good example of where you can see the separation of color. Now imagine that little bit of halo there, about 1/8 of an inch all the way around it, each one of these. So we redid that. Then we took it a step further and I started freehanding some stuff that was just completely missing. Again, kind of like I did over here, except now instead of doing straight lines, we're doing circles. And this line that you see is about 60% me freehanding, along with a connecting line here and the connecting line here. And then over here, this one that you're looking at, that was 100% freehand. And I could see it's not that great. From afar, it's decent. The closer you get up to it, you can see the touch up. You can see the line that I had to touch up going from here up, from here up, from here down. So we're pretty close right now. We're at about 6 inches. So if you get it close, you can totally tell. But if you step back from player's position, it doesn't look too bad. The next time that I do it, I'll probably use some type of template. My freehand skills aren't quite good enough and up to the challenge as of yet. But the thickness of the line is really important so it doesn't stand out, and that we accomplished pretty well. So overall, again, all the inserts around each one of these, that's all redone. There was a lot of wood showing around here, a lot of wood showing around here. There's touch up right here. This whole part was missing. I think it was on this one as well.
Yeah, where was it? Oh, it was over here. This was really bad. So in fact, we did this line, and you can see some of the touch up here. And this was all wood right here. And you can see I haven't touched up the orange on special, but I worked it over to that spot. We created this point. And the number one thing that I didn't touch, it was a tough decision to do it or not to do it, was the white, which after 40 years, 45 years, this machine is not white anymore. These are all cream tones that have been UV stained, nicotine stained, dirt, grime. And after coloring it up, I just looked at what was going to be visible once all the plastics were on, once the playfield was assembled, and there wasn't quite enough there that was missing or damaged for me to go back over and attempt to color match. That was one of the reasons. And then the other main reason was each part of the playfield with the cream color is a different tone, it's a different lightness. And so over here is way darker and stained than it is over here. And it's different than it is up there. So they all have different individual colors that you'd have to match. And I just didn't think it was worth spending the time and effort to try to get each one of those with basically, once everything's assembled, we'd be looking at, these marks here, the mark around the 1000, and the areas around the circles that I created. And that's about it. Everything else with the white was pretty well done and held up. But this is the results of our playfield touch-up. We are about to go with a head full of steam into populating the top side of the playfield and wrapping this one up. This puppy is just about done. And it spent the last 20 years in a barn, and we have brought it back to life. There are some small touch-ups that I'll probably address on the cabinet, paint touch-ups, as well as the back box. The border is a little rough, and possibly the back glass. But the whole machine we've gone through from head to toe. The bottom playfield, or the bottom of the cabinet, that whole control unit was taken apart, disassembled, new parts where needed, cleaned, refurbished. The bottom side of the playfield, the same thing, stripped down where it needed to be stripped down, cleaned, new parts installed, all new sleeves, pieces cleaned up that needed to be cleaned up, that were rough, rusted, whatnot. Back box, the whole back box was disassembled. All of our relays, all of our stepper units, all of our coils, any type of mechanism, it was all taken apart, it was all cleaned, and it's all functioning great now. The top side of the playfield, which was our last big to-do, we have just completed it, and we have put it back together now, and it looks spectacular. And this thing cleaned up amazing. It just night and day difference from what we started with. Very, very impressed with it. Right from the top, the flippers, all brand new. Bottom side, top side, all of it brand new. Rollover buttons, brand new. The housings for the kickouts, brand new. Pop bumper assemblies, brand new. Rollover guides, the plastic rollover guides, brand new. Our plastics were in incredible shape. They turned out amazing. They had literally no artwork wear, and they weren't cracked. I mean, it's mind-boggling. They weren't bent. They had a little bit of nicotine stain, and a lot of that came off. Our upper apron, full restore. That thing is just as smooth as can be. Looks super, super sharp. Very happy with the results that we got on that. These lane guides, those were bent to hell. You couldn't even put a ball in between these without it sticking, holding itself together. Those we pulled apart, we cleaned up, some rusty spots, cleaned it off, got back down to the nice chrome or nickel plating, and then bent it properly, reinstalled. All these stand-up targets, these were beat to hell. I didn't know if I was going to be able to reuse them. They turned out amazing. We replaced all of them, or we didn't replace all of them. We refurbished all of them. All of our posts. I mean, these Playfield posts were disgusting. All those, they just cleaned up amazing. Tons of little spots for the screws that were just completely stripped. We fixed all those. We had fixed them on the bottom side of the Playfield. You had seen in some of the previous videos and pictures on whether it be Instagram or YouTube or Facebook and whatnot. But the top side had the same thing. We probably had a half dozen different places that needed to be addressed because they were stripped out and they weren't holding all of your rubbers. They were being pulled in one direction or the other. And the rubbers, obviously, all those are completely replaced, brand new. A lot of the parts, like here we go with this, the bumper. This part right here was basically stripped down. We sanded the hell out of it, and because we probably took off some of the plating, we didn't want it to tarnish. We hit it with a poly coat, so that way it sealed it, it'll protect it, won't rust. Same with this. I mean, this thing was super, super nasty. You can see where some of the stain was still. That was all rust. So it came out pretty decent. The gate came out pretty decent. But again, all that's been poly cleared, so we're good to go there. Everything under the apron, our guide, all of this, every mechanism under the apron was just as rusty as can be. I mean, it was really, really bad. And so we had to sand the hell out of it, clean it up good, polish it, and then hit it with the poly clear. It's going to make a big difference for anybody that later on when we're playing this machine, whether you sell it or whether it's on location, it's gonna hold together a lot better. It's not going to rust. It's not going to deteriorate as a result of not having that plating. So these side rails, they cleaned up amazing. I mean, the mirror finish on these things is awesome. The Playfield in general, we had tons of touch-ups all over the place. All this part right here, basically on the left-hand side of this rollover, tons of that was missing. Our point was missing here, and if you look, it looks pretty damn good. I'm very impressed with that. Very happy how that came out. Small touch-ups that we had talked about previously. Here's one of them. There's one of them. Where's the other one? Here's that one up here. All of our inserts, everything that you see with an insert, all of those were touched up, and it really made a big difference. So it's nice and solid color, and you get a good pop as far as the outline around the insert. Same goes for around here. All these areas were really worn down, and we took care of that. It came out great. Skin tone touch-ups, those came out pretty good. We're pretty happy with that. Those are real tough to get a good color match there. Then at the top side of the Playfield, which was worn down big time, again, it's hard to see, but there's a giant patch right here that we blended in. One right here, another right here, another right here. That's actually a good view. So you can see just the texture difference. Not even so much of a color difference, but there's a texture difference. That was bare wood. All the spots that I'm showing you were bare wood. This was bare wood. We just had very, very good success color matching, especially being our first time doing that on a Playfield. So all of the inserts up here, they were all touched up. Everything on the machine is working great. I'm just blown away with overall how it looks, how it came out, the sheen that it has. The color just pops. You can see, our protector here from our lane guide. Just show you a couple of different angles. I mean, the playfield, when you're playing it, it just looks wet, which I think is awesome. Huge shout out to Chris for helping me with that protector. Really, really appreciate it. We'll be doing that for most of our games, especially the older ones. I think it's a great alternative to clear. I mean, look at the reflection. Look at that kicker, the slingshot. You can see the whole mechanism off of the playfield. That's nice. And again, the biggest benefit to this is not just the looks, but the fact that this is going to hold up. This is not going to wear. The protector is made of the PETG plastic, the same as your playfield plastics. And it's super, super thin, and it protects the hell out of the playfield. It's great. And it lays flat. It's nice. It's very, very nice. It takes time to cut properly, and it takes some strategizing in certain areas to get it to fit properly. But the overall result, I think, is amazing. And like I said, is a huge, huge difference between rolling a ball on a playfield that's 45 years old or more, and having it, go over a little bit of a sunken insert, or a little bit of a pitted area, or some planking in the wood, which you're going to see on all these type of games that are of this age, versus having plastic that is perfectly flat. It's giving you the gameplay that was intended right from the start, and the looks are just amazing. I mean, look at the colors pop. I'll throw some before and after photos up here shortly, so you guys can really see the effect. The apron, this thing had a giant sticker here. That's nice and smooth now. Very happy how that came out. No paint removal or anything like that. Like I said, it's not perfect by any means, but what a drastic change. So that's 1973 Gulfstream. It's fully working, and we will be doing a gameplay video here very shortly for you folks. It's a great out-of-ball game. Take a quick look at it. Internet pinball database or Pinside. Go on YouTube, check out the videos. This thing is going to be a great game to show folks, and I'm really excited to be able to play it for you. So, one last look. That's Gulfstream.